Ephesians 5:11, and not take part with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. It's unfortunate, but we live in a world today where the cost of a person's integrity at this point is probably cheaper than groceries. Our food and water are basically poison. Our education system is horrendous. They're teaching kids to be obedient and comply, not to critically think or even think at all. And it was always obvious, at least to me at least, that we had a multi-tier justice system. And we've seen plenty of rich and connected people get away with murder over the years, from athletes and actors to even politicians. And while poor black men in America were getting 15 years in jail for drug-related offenses, the same men who own the jails and that were profiting off of those sentences were selling guns under the table to foreign nations and transporting those very same drugs into America. Rest in peace to Barry Seal. But I'm not here to talk about Iran-Contra and the Rockefeller drug laws. Not today, at least. Not going to get into Whitewater. Not going to get into 9/11 and the Patriot Act, Operation Mockingbird, how it's still going on. I'm not even going to talk about digital IDs. Today, I'm going to talk about Les Wexner. My name is Bayes, and welcome to Bayes is Based. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I'm very happy to be here, and I have a feeling that this is going to be the start of something very special. I also think it will probably be the end of me, but I hope to be able to get a lot accomplished and, do some good work and actually make a difference before then. But either way, I promise it will be a hell of a show. And I want you guys to know that I'm taking this extremely seriously. You're never going to see any clickbait or wild allegations here. I'm going to keep everything as grounded and factual to the best of my abilities. If I'm ever proven wrong about anything, obviously I'll take accountability, but I'm going to do my best to make sure that that doesn't happen. And, I just really want you guys to know that I'm doing this with the best intentions and that I'm doing this because I truly want to see the world become a better place. And I also want to make this part crystal clear because I think that it's very important, especially for the integrity of the show. So let's just get it out of the way. I don't give a rat's ass about either political party. I have no love for either of them. As far as I'm concerned, they are all scumbags. I see Democrats and Republicans both like WWE. Maybe they don't really like each other behind the scenes, but at the end of the day, they're just putting on a show. They're trying to make their money. They don't really care about us. We're all just marks. We're all just falling for it. Everybody's eating it up. And they're all liars. The majority of them are corrupt and probably belong in jail. The fact that even now, with the administration we have in power today, that Nancy Pelosi still hasn't been investigated and charged with insider trading really should tell you all you need to know about the Republicans and the Democrats and the charade that is being done. And that's what it is. It's a charade. They are playing us. We see it time and time again. It doesn't matter who's in power. There's never any accountability. It never gets better for us. It only gets better for them. And if the people in our country ever really united and stood together, we would take this country back. And we can change things and create better lives. Better lives for ourselves, for each other, and most importantly, better lives for our kids, our nieces, our nephews, future generations. But it would be done not just at their expense, but at the expense of the people that they truly work for and answer to. And believe me, it sure as hell isn't us. Despite what they teach you in school, despite whatever you want to believe about this country and the Constitution and what it's supposed to be, it's just not the way it is. And they're never going to let it happen. It's never going to just change. We have to make the change that we want to see. I just want to say that one more time. We have to make the change that we want to see. Because one of these days, we're going to wake up and it is going to be too late. But, like I said, I'm not going to get into all that today. We got a lot to cover. But before we get into all that, though, I got to give a shout out to Ian Carroll. He does amazing work, and he's shown me a lot of love lately. I never thought he was going to play that song. I didn't even know if he was going to listen to it. To be honest, the whole reason why I made that song was because I had sent him a message earlier trying to send him some of my files. And when I brought up AI, I'm sure he gets that kind of stuff all the time, but especially when I brought up AI, he just said flat out, he's like, I don't know if I could trust your files. I don't know if I could trust your sources. He's like, make some content, I'll check it out. But I mean, what am I gonna do if I started making videos? Like, I got a whole show that I'm creating based on my files and my research and everything I've dug it. It was like, make content. Like, what am I? So anyway, that was why I made that track. I just figured I could just jam a lot of information about various topics. Just cram it in there, send it. But like I said, I didn't even know if he was gonna listen to it, and he just bam, just put it right on there, and it caught me off track, caught me off guard, I should say, and I didn't have any content up. I mean, I had just made that page. So then I started releasing some older songs that were kind of personal, that like it would give people that were subscribing an idea to like get to know me, get to know what I'm about, get some kind of backstory. And I just needed time to set this all up. I realized that I needed to do something like this a couple months back, and originally I was thinking about just writing a book. I didn't know what I was gonna do. Um, I'll get into all that and how all this came about on another episode because I've already been rambling for a little bit and I really want to get started on the topic. But that's what it's gonna be. I plan on putting out episodes a couple times a week, so you guys will, just stay tuned. Stay tuned. And Ian, I know when kept saying Bays is based coming soon, you were under the assumption that it was going to be something music related, but surprise, it's not. And those were not bots the other day, and it was my birthday. And again, thank you for everything, for all the support, and I hope we could collaborate soon. But now, let's go. All right, guys, before we get started, we're going to have to take a little detour real quick because I just got a notification and speak of the homie. And it looks like he is he promoting Buyer's app?
So, that'll go off to approval. We'll do some more scans. We'll come back to it later.
Yes, he is. He's promoting his new app. I'm actually really looking forward to this.
The Banana Man, he's got a funny little name.
All right, if you guys don't know, actually, I'm just going to mute it, but I'll keep the screen moving. So, Ian Carroll is creating an app where you are going to be able to scan products, especially food, and it is going to tell you exactly who owns them so that you have a better understanding of where you're spending your money, who you're supporting, and make sure you're not getting poisoned. I mean, to some degree, right? That's actually how I started following him. It wasn't even any of the conspiracy theory type stuff, or it was his early journalist work. I think he was the first one that I heard about the whole GameStop thing with. And then I saw his videos online about mega corporations. But yeah, Ian Carroll is the man. I'm always going to support this guy. And let's get back to it. All right. So, Leslie Herbert Wexner, born September 8th, 1937, is an American billionaire, businessman, co-founder, and chair of Bath and Body Works Limited. He was the principal, and he's been the principal in Abercrombie & Fitch, Victoria's Secret, Lane Bryant, Lufthansa, amongst other retail corporations, Wexner retained Jeffrey Epstein as his financial manager from 1987 to 2007 and was initially the main client of Epstein's money management firm. According to Bloomberg, Epstein ran his business from a house Wexner owned and sometimes lived in. All right, now, um, I'm not going to get into the early education and all this stuff. I'm going to pretend that you guys watched the prologue video that I made for this episode that I put out yesterday, where I do a pretty detailed dive into the rise of his business and, how he started working in his parents' store. He identified some things about the way his father was doing business that he thought that he could improve on. His father shot him down. He borrowed some money from his aunt in a bank, opened up a store. First year, they did $160,000 in sales, which is more than his parents had ever done. A year later, they close up shop. They work for him. And that was 1963, 64. By 1969, the company went public. Wexner's father would pass away in 1975. Yes, the close friend of Les Wexner, who served on the board of the Limited, which became L Brands, alongside members of his family, was Robert H. Murawski. Murawski joined the company in 1972 as vice chairman of the board and was a key figure in the early growth of the business. He reportedly had such confidence in Wexner's vision that he sold his house and moved into a smaller apartment to join the company. For a period, the board was notably small, including Wexner, his mother Bella, his sister Susan, and Robert Murawski. The composition of the board and the heavy family presence became a point of scrutiny from activist investors decades later. Murawski resigned from his position in 1987. Years later, was among those who criticized Wexner's close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, who became Wexner's personal money manager and was given power of attorney over Wexner's finances. Epstein was not on the main company board, but was a trustee of the Wexner Foundation. Early 70s. Limited had aggressive organic growth. 1969, the business goes public. 1970, annual reports predict national dominance. By 1974, they have 1,000 employees. Remember, it's Les Wexner, his family, immediate family, parents and sister, and Robert Murawski, a guy who left his job, downsized his home because he believed in Les Wexner and the Limited. That's very important to remember. 1975, his father dies. 1976, they open their 100th store. 1977, corporate consolidation. They move into a dedicated Morse Road headquarters in Columbus, a physical sign that the family chain is now a real corporate machine. In 1978, they prepare for their first major acquisition, Mast Industries, Wexner's primary supplier, making the Limited a more fully integrated design production retail system. All right, and just so you guys know, I've been researching this stuff for a very long time. I have a ton of notes and files. I do not, however, have them on the computer that I'm doing this recording on. So when I pull things up, it's all on the browser. I got a couple different things that we're going to go over, but it's all on the browser. So if you see me looking to the side, it's because I have another device that's offline where I'm able to tap into some other notes. I write a lot of things down. I have a lot of books. Of course, I have an external hard drive. God forbid anything happens to me. Not that I'm paranoid at the moment, but I do have a very good story that I will share in the near future about when I was paranoid and why. Because I am 1,000% sure that I did get flagged by at least one intelligence agency. But like I said, we'll get into that another day. And the reason I bring that up is because when I ran a search and analysis into Lex Wexner on ChatGPT, specifically his acquisitions, something interesting happened. core retail brand acquisitions. It says early buildup. It talks about his IPO in 1969, giving him liquid currency and for future acquisitions. Limited express, internal acquisition spin up. Not a purchase from outside, but an important brand creation. In 1980, he opens his first limited express. So that's not necessarily an acquisition, that's just more of an expansion within his own business. The first acquisition that it brings up is Victoria's Secret in 1982. But as we just discussed, his real first acquisition was his supplier, Mast Industries, in 1978. And now, this might not seem like a big detail to you or to most people, but for somebody like me who has put in the kind of hours and the kind of work and has connected the dots the way I have, I would even go as far to say that this could be considered a form of censorship. And you're going to understand very shortly when we start connecting these dots. And this is one of the many problems with AI. See, AI, even ChatGPT, as censored as it is an amazing resource for accumulating information and putting things together and connecting these dots. But the problem is it lies to you. There are times that it just flat out makes things up, and there are a lot of times that it seems to just leave out some certain key details. And that's what I feel it did here. I don't know why it wouldn't have brought up that 1978 Mast Industries acquisition. All right, let's create a timeline for a second. 1963, Les Wexner opens his first store. 1964, his parents close their store and go work for him. 1969, at this point, he's got 5 or 6 stores, and he brings the company public, giving him additional capital and officially bringing him into the Wall Street scene. And through a connection with a man that he was already working with named Alfred Tubman, who was not only a very close associate of Wexner's, but he was actually one of the people responsible for shopping malls in America as we know them today. This helped Wexner create a network to secure the leases necessary to expand as rapidly as he did and set him up to acquire all those companies with a combination of large cash the company had from high profit merchandise they were selling, the additional capital from going public, and the connections with the banks on Wall Street that he was now establishing relationships with. Then we get to 1972. He brings on Robert Murawski, a guy who left his job, downsized his home to work for Wexner, and becomes the only non-family member on the board. This is at least until 1987 when Wexner brought in Jeffrey Epstein to manage his finances because Epstein and Murawski just didn't get along. And when the two clashed and Murawski went to Wexner after 15 years of dedicated service and said, "What the hell is this guy even doing here?" Wexner took Epstein's side and Murawski left the company. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll get to that. 1975, Les Wexner's father dies. 1976, they open their 100th store. 1977, they move into the Morse Road headquarters in Columbus. 1978, they make their first acquisition in Mast Industries, their supplier. And that is a lot of growth in a short period of time. And I'm sure it took a lot of work and a lot of dedication. And not just from Les Wexner, but everybody involved. I mean, look at Robert Murawski. The guy left his other job and even moved into a smaller home. And, you know, we know that that didn't work out for him in the end, but what are you going to do? But who else was dedicated in making all this happen? Who else was involved with the business? Well, one of the men who was an essential part of this business during all these acquisitions was a man named Arthur Shapiro. And now it's time for me to move over here. So who was Arthur Shapiro? Arthur Shapiro was a Columbus, Ohio attorney and partner in the firm Short Shapiro Kelman Warren. His firm represented major corporate clients, including Les Wexner's company, The Limited, later L Brands. Shapiro personally managed The Limited's account. At the time of his death, he was 43 years old. Oh, I wonder how he died. Professionally, he sat in a sensitive spot, inside tax work and business structures for one of Ohio's biggest corporate success stories, while under his own tax cloud. Well, that's interesting because up until this point, it seems like Les Wexner had a real strong hold in things. And, as we've established and said multiple times, his family was on the board, plus Robert Murawski. And, all right, let's just see where this goes. IRS troubles and tax shelters. By 1985, Shapiro was in serious trouble with the IRS. He had failed to file federal income tax returns for about, wait for it, 7 years. Well, that's interesting. I'm no mathematician, but 1985, 7 years, what is that, 1978? Oh, 1978, the same year as Les Wexner's first acquisition. I'm sure that's just a coincidence, though. All right, let's see. He had invested in questionable tax shelters, and he was facing a federal investigation into tax evasion and related schemes. He was scheduled to appear before a federal grand jury to testify about those tax issues and whether others had helped conceal income. In one related case, Shapiro was listed as an unindicted co-conspirator. His business associate, Barry Kessler, and others were convicted of helping him file false returns in the 1970s, while Shapiro faced no charges in that specific case, a setup that gave him potential leverage as a witness against others. Now we get into the murder. The murder, it happened on March 6th, 1985. The timing. Shapiro was murdered March 6, 1985, one day before his scheduled grand jury appearance. The event reconstructed from police records and later reporting. On that morning, Shapiro met an unidentified man in a red BMW at a Columbus cemetery for a secretive breakfast meeting. A witness later described the other man dressed in black with a broad brim hat and a limp. Sounds like Kaiser Sose. Shortly after 9:30, Shapiro suddenly fled the BMW. The other man chased him, firing a handgun, grazing Shapiro before he reached the door of a nearby condominium. As Shapiro pounded on the door, the man shot him twice in the head at close range. As Shapiro pounded on the door, the man shot him twice in the head at close range, then drove away in Shapiro's BMW. The car was found the next day in a mall parking lot, wiped clean of fingerprints. Police quickly characterized the killing as a professional mob-style hit. Official investigation and the Kessler theory. Mainstream accounts, Columbus Dispatch, Daily Beast, summarized on Wexner's page, line up on this core. The primary suspect for decades has been Shapiro's business associate, Barry L. Kessler, a Columbus tax accountant. Kessler worked closely with Shapiro in tax shelter schemes, was later convicted in Florida in 1994 for arranging another contract killing, his business partner John DeRue, showing he was capable of hiring a hitman. I mean, that makes sense. Had a history of entanglements in shady real estate tax deals and had been under suspicion but never charged in an earlier double murder of business partner Frank Yasinoff and fiancée Ella Rich. Claims reported years later by former employees say they saw a man matching the killer's description at Kessler's office the day after Shapiro's murder, and Kessler counting a large pile of cash before handing it to him. That's interesting. I wonder who those employees were, though. However, Kessler was never charged in Shapiro's murder. He went to prison for the DeRue case and died in there in 2005, never admitting involvement in Shapiro's killing. At some point, I got to look into the circumstances behind that death. Columbus police said Columbus police have said publicly that no suspect was ever definitively eliminated and the case remains officially solved. So in the narrow police talking to the mainstream press version, the story is tax lawyer about to testify, a shady accountant with a history of violent problem solving, and a hit that conveniently silences a witness. But then this is where it gets a lot more interesting. We have the Shapiro murder file and what it actually is. In 1991, the Columbus Police Organized Crime Bureau produced an internal memo titled The Shapiro Homicide Investigation, Analysis and Hypothesis, authored by analyst Elizabeth A. Leop and Commander Curtis Markham. It is not a normal case file, but an analytic document explicitly trying to figure out if this was a mafia La Cosa Nostra hit, and who had contact with Shapiro, something to gain from silencing him, ties to La Cosa Nostra figures, and enough money to buy a contract killing. Key points in the file: it describes Shapiro's murder as strongly resembling a La Cosa Nostra hit and surveys mob families with presence in or near Ohio. It maps unusual interactive relationships among entities including the Limited and Les Wexner, Walsh Trucking Company of New Jersey, and a man named Frank Walsh, Omni Exploration, Omni Oil, the Edward J. DiBartolo Company, a Youngstown mall developer, and local developer John W. Kessler, not Berry. It notes Frank Walsh and Walsh Trucking was the primary transporter for the Limited and was under investigation by the New York Organized Crime Task Force, with notices sent to Walsh at 1 Limited Parkway, Columbus, the Limited's headquarters. Okay, so Frank Walsh, owner of Walsh Trucking Company, was the primary deliverer of, or the primary shipper of Limited merchandise, and they were getting their mail sent to the Limited headquarters. You follow? Both Walsh and DiBartolo had been identified in other states' reports as associates of the Genovese LaRocca crime family. On that basis, the memo hypothesizes that Les Wexner, via the Limited, was associating with at least 2 businessmen tied to organized crime, and that the Genovese LaRocca family might consider him a friend in the loose sense of a valuable associate. Well, it makes sense. I mean, if the guy's getting his mail to his business and he's delivering all of his goods. Crucially, the memo does not prove that Wexner ordered the hit, nor that any specific individual bought the contract. It explicitly omits the motive and the exact identity of whoever would benefit from Shapiro's death could not be determined with any certainty. It's an intelligence analysis document, lots of pattern mapping, some speculation, some plagiarism from other crime reports, which the memo itself admits, and a hypothesis that organized crime-linked businesses associates around Wexner fits the profile of someone that could arrange the hit. So they're basically saying, like, look, we don't have the smoking gun. We're not saying that he did it, but we should definitely look at him. And I don't understand why they didn't. I mean, just the fact alone, if you look, when Les Wexner had his first acquisition in 1978, at that point, if he's already affiliated and this guy, Arthur Shapiro, is involved in those deals, and he's not filing his taxes, and he's dealing with shady tax shelters, hiding money for other people, possibly people affiliated with the mob, and all these people are within the Limited's vicinity and direct contact in business with Les Wexner, to the point where these people are even using his headquarters as a mailing address. I mean, at some point, how much smoke do you need to see before you acknowledge the fire? But it gets even better. The suppression and resurrection of the file. The Shapiro murder file became controversial, not for what it proved, but for what the Columbus police leadership did with it. In the mid-1990s, Columbus Police Chief James Jackson ordered the destruction of the report, calling it wild speculation about prominent business leaders and potentially libelous. So the Columbus police chief gets this report that's connecting an awful lot of dots and makes an obvious case for an investigation, and to say the least, and he destroys it, calling it wild speculation and libelous. I mean, it kind of sounds like Cash Patel talking about Epstein, but I mean, that's just me, right? Jackson was later charged and disciplined for improper disposal of a public record. I mean, at least there's some resonance of justice. A civil service commission upheld the charge. Good. The file was long believed to be destroyed until an unredacted copy resurfaced. The file was long to be destroyed until an unredacted copy resurfaced and was obtained via public records request in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Later published by Columbus Alive and Columbus Free Press, and more recently mirrored on archive.org. And what do you know, guys? Wait, do I have it? And what do you know, guys? Look what we have here. It is the Shapiro homicide investigation. An analytic project opened in 1985 as a result of the mob-style murder of Arthur Shapiro, local attorney. I mean, if you want, I could read over all this. There's probably, obviously, a lot more details here than my notes. Strong similarities. All right, hold on. It says, Sir, an analytical project was opened in 1985 as a result of a mob-style murder of Arthur Shapiro, a local attorney in the law firm then Schwartz Shapiro Kelman Warren. Because of the strong similarities between this homicide and a Mafia La Cosa Nostra hit, the analysis included an in-depth study of major La Cosa Nostra groups having contact in or near Central Ohio area. These groups seem to include crime families in Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and to some degree, the Genovese family in New York City. There seems to be very little reliable investigative literature concerning the Chicago and Detroit groups. However, we do have access reports, the Pennsylvania Crime Commission and the New Jersey Commission of the investigation with reference to groups in Ohio and areas to the east of us. The attached La Cosa Nostra information was lifted and in many cases blatantly plagiarized from those sources. Okay, so now my notes, that was the ChatGPT version. Now that we're reading the real thing, it's got a little bit more meat on that bone. So over here, it mentions the plagiarism, but it leaves out the fact that when they did this report, they're saying, look, like we have reliable information that Chicago and Detroit are not touching this, that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Alfred Tubman, the man that I referenced earlier, who was the mall connection for Les Wexner, he was a developer in Detroit. Not that there's any affiliation there, it's just something I wanted to point out. It stuck out in my mind. The Pennsylvania Crime Commission and New Jersey Commission of the investigation. So, New Jersey Commission, they're talking about Frank Walsh. Frank Walsh, who owned Walsh Trucking, who handled the shipping for the Limited. I believe that company was based in New Jersey. And that Omni Exploration, Omni Oil, that company was based in Pennsylvania. So that's why all this is coming together. Over time, the analysis of Shapiro homicide became greatly expanded and more complex with the development of unusual interactive relationships between the following business organizations. A, the Major Chord Jazz Club and its parent investment groups, now defunct. B, the Limited and its investment interest. C, the Walsh Trucking Company and the alleged relationship between owner Frank Walsh and the Genovese crime family. D, the law firm, now known as Schwartz, Kelm, Warren, and Rubenstein. Homicide detectives report that the name was changed within hours of Shapiro's homicide. So they didn't even wait till the next day to take the guy's name off the door. I mean, is that not odd to anybody? E, Omni Oil Company, F. Edward DiBartolo Corporation of Youngstown, Ohio, and the alleged relationships between owner Edward DiBartolo and the Genovese crime family, and G. John W. Kessler, a local developer. So they're not even mentioning this Barry Kessler guy. They like whoever did this report. This name, what's her name? Elizabeth Leah. She's saying this is where we need to look into this investigation. The primary sources for our information are intelligence summaries from investigators in our bureau, intelligence from Magloclan. Is that what this is? Magloclan? I don't know. The Pennsylvania Crime Commission and the New Jersey Commission of Investigation. The published reports from major media, newspapers, periodicals, copies of relevant reports are available for reference. Okay, so historical data. The Major Chord Jazz Club and Jessery 2 Limited Partnership now defunct. So, Jessery 2 Limited Partnership was formed to own and manage the jazz club. This partnership is operated by Jessery 2 Corporation, of which Jerry Hammond was a president. Mr. Hammond was also president of Columbus City Council at the time. SNJC Holding Incorporated is named as an investor in the jazz club. It was incorporated August 6, 1987 by James H. Balthaser, attorney with Short, Kelm, Warren, and Rubenstein. This law firm was legal counsel for the Limited. The address for SNJC Holding is Suite 3710 Huntington Center, the same address as Wexner Investment Company. So there are not just a lot of dots that could be connected, but there's a lot of, I don't know, in my opinion, evidence. I don't know if it'd be considered circumstantial, but I mean, there's a lot of, All right, let me just keep going. W&K Partnership was not registered and its owners could not be positively identified, but it is listed as an investor in the Jazz Club. It is noted, however, that Wexner and Kessler are co-developers of Wexley, and there was an annexation dispute involving the city of Columbus and Wexley land. It is possible that W&K Partnership was the forerunner of the New Albany Company through which Wexner and Kessler developed Wexley. The New Albany Company. I'm pretty sure. I think Epstein ended up being president of that. I swear to God, I didn't. This is the first time I'm actually reading the Shapiro homicide. Up until this point with my research, I only had my own file. The Smith-Hale partnership was the investment of Ben W. Hale Jr. and Constance Smith in the Jazz Club. Mr. Hale and Smith's husband, Harrison W. Smith, are partners in the law firm and who represented Wexley developers, Wexley Kessler, and the land annexation. Other related entities. The law firm, now known as Schwartz, Kelm, Warren, and Rubenstein. Yo, I can't get over that they changed the name the same day the guy was shot. It says hours after he was killed. They boom, replaced him. Wexner Investment Company was incorporated December 31st, 1987 by Stanley Schwartz as an agent. So they kept working with the firm. So Arthur Shapiro basically gets executed and one of his partners continues the business and takes over. Samax Trading Corporation, a company Wexner controls, was incorporated in July 1985 by Stanley Schwartz, who described the purpose. The privately held company is engaged in business liquidation. Through Samax, Wexner acquired 70% of Omni Exploration in August 1985. Stanley Schwartz was elected to the board of directors with Wexner. Walsh Trucking Company was the major trucking company for the Limited. Francis Frank Walsh, owner and president, allegedly has strong ties to the Genovese crime family. In July 1984, National Westminster Bank of New York notified Frank Walsh Finance Resources Company that the New York Department of Law Organized Crime Task Force had issued a subpoena for Frank Walsh's bank records. The notice was addressed to Frank Walsh Financial Resource at 1 Limited Parkway, the address of the Limited. Leslie Wexner and the Youngstown, Ohio developer Edward J. DiBartolo have a long history of partnership and business dealings. Mr. DiBartolo allegedly has strong ties to the Genovese LaRocca crime family. Okay, so Lex Wexner was mobbed up. He was mobbed up. And this is all before Epstein even got into the picture. This is crazy. Other data supporting linkage. Harold L. Levin, president of Wexner Investment Company, is also vice president of PFI Leasing Company. The two companies share a common telephone number on the 37th floor of the Huntington Center office building. The 37th floor of the Huntington Center is also the address for John W. Kessler Company and the New Albany Company. The Wexner Investment Company also has an office in Suite 1675 of the Huntington Center, as does the First Intercontinental Realty and Omni Exploration. The 16th floor is also one of two offices for the law firm of Schwartz, Kelm, Warren, and Rubenstein. So it is all one no, I'm not going to say that. I can't say it's all one corporation, but they are very, very tight. And it makes sense. Remember, when Robert Murawski in 1972 started working with Les Wexner, he had to leave his other job, and he left his home to get closer. We also know that when Jeffrey Epstein started working with Les Wexner, that Wexner gave him multiple homes. A mansion in Manhattan, I believe, is worth about $80 million today. At the time, I think it went for 20. Gave him a home in Ohio. So, like, the whole thing with Jeffrey Epstein being some kind of anomaly where Les Wexner is this innocent, generous philanthropist. They got his name on a school. They got his name on a hospital, I think, and all this crap. And you know, this guy, like, this is crazy. He was mobbed up. Epstein didn't corrupt and take advantage of Les Wexner. Les Wexner brought him in. Arthur Shapiro was reportedly in direct contact with Vice Chairman Robert Murawski, number 2 at the Limited. Okay, so Robert Murawski, they're calling him number 2 at the Limited, and he gets into a clash with Jeffrey Epstein when Epstein first walks in the door, pretty much. Murawski's there 15 years. He's number 2. I mean, what does that tell you? It has been noted that Les Wexner and Edward DiBartolo have a long history of business partnerships. In June 1987, Robert Murawski abruptly and inexplicably left his employment with the Limited amid rumors of friction with Les Wexner. I wonder why. Murawski then appeared in the hierarchy of, can't pronounce the word, Jampacked Allied stores amid rumors that Wexner had planned to acquire the stores. DiBartolo had loaned financial backing. Allied Federated. Arthur Shapiro, a local attorney in the firm, then Schwartz, Shapiro, Kelm, and Warren, was murdered March 6, 1985 in a homicide having strong marks of a Mafia La Cosa Nostra hit. The homicide remains unsolved at this date. While all alternative remains open for this investigation, and the homicide is considered to be and is being treated as a hit. And the chief of police, this is the document that the chief of police destroyed. Did they ever do an investigation? Did he look into any of this? Did he make any calls? Was the FBI contacted? Would it have mattered? Like, is it just me? Like, this is crazy. This is crazy. The motive is unknown. Really? The motive is... They're being pretty generous there. All right. The motive is unknown. Homicide Squad investigators interviewed a number of associates, including the immediate family of the victim. Consensus was that Shapiro was a quiet, shy, private, secretive person and tended to be a loner. No one could suggest a reason for his murder. I mean, I could give you a couple reasons right now, but that's just me. It was learned that Shapiro was the subject of an investigation by Internal Revenue Service because he failed to file income tax returns for some 7 years prior to his death. Remember, 7 years prior to his death lines up perfectly with the 1978 acquisition of Mast Industries that kickstarted all the other acquisitions. The homicide occurred 1 day prior to Shapiro's scheduled appearance before a grand jury in the IRS investigation, and there was some conjecture that Shapiro was in a position to provide information to the grand jury that would have been damaging to some other party or parties. The identity of that party and the nature of that information, however, could not be determined with any certainty. Given the mafia hit, another question is the identity of an individual who had the necessary contacts in the La Cosa Nostra and the personal financial resources to buy the contract. Thus, while the motive remains unclear, the suspect is an individual who knew Shapiro and had some professional contact with him, would benefit from his death, ensuring his silence, had close contacts with La Cosa Nostra figures or trusted La Cosa Nostra associates, had personal financial resources to afford the cost of the contract. Edward DiBartolo is a real estate developer out of Youngstown, Ohio, and is associated with Les Wexner of the Limited in Columbus. These subjects have well-known history of business and investment partners, and in 1986 attempted jointly to acquire Carter Hawley Hale department stores. Francis Frank Walsh is owner and chief executive officer of Walsh Trucking Company out of New Jersey. Oh, I was right. It is New Jersey. Walsh Trucking has been the primary transporter for the Limited in Columbus. In July 1984, Walsh was being investigated by the New York Organized Crime Task Force. Notices to this, okay, saying the same thing, that it was sent to Les Wexner's building. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. Like I said, I read off of my notes, and now I'm reading off the official document. Part of the reason that I'm doing that too is not just for you guys, but for me as well, because I want to see what the differences are. Because like I said, when you're using AI, sometimes a lot of key details, for one reason or another, just won't be 100% accurate, or they won't really line up, or something will get left out. And I mean, as you can see, there's a lot of details in this that didn't make it into there. I'm glad that I looked up this file for the video, but this is crazy. And I'm just gonna scroll for a minute. So if you guys want, that's it. All right, I just took a little break to get myself a cup of coffee. Normally, I feel like this would be a good time to just cut it. Where are we at right now? Just under 50 minutes. Decent time for an episode. But I am pumped up, and there is a lot more that I can get to on this. And I mean, I'm not drinking coffee for nothing. Buckle up. It's going to be a long night. So, while I was taking my break and drinking a little coffee, I went on to Google AI. And I asked, was Les Wexner ever questioned for the murder of Arthur Shapiro? And this is what it came up. It says, Les Wexner was part of a broader police investigation into the 1985 murder of his lawyer, Arthur Shapiro, but no evidence ever linked him to the crime. And he was not considered a primary suspect. I mean, that saying he's not a primary suspect, I totally understand. But saying that no evidence ever linked him to the crime, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. Homicide investigators interviewed various associates of Shapiro. A police memo later dubbed the Arthur Shapiro murder file, which I'm pretty sure that's what we just read, did speculate about Wexner's business dealings having tenuous links to alleged organized crime figures, but the report explicitly stated it did not accuse Wexner of any involvement in the murder. Is that what you guys got out of that reading? Do you think it explicitly stated that it was not accusing Les Wexner at all? Like he was like scot-free? And if that's the case, then why did the police chief, what was his name, James Jackson? Why did he feel the need to destroy the file and call it libelous? And say that it was wild accusations? The primary focus of the investigation centered on Shapiro's business partner, Barry Kessler. Here we go with this guy again. Shapiro was killed the day before he was scheduled to testify before a grand jury regarding illegal tax schemes in which he and Kessler were involved. Now, remember, that is misleading. Kessler had already been convicted on those tax schemes. The tax schemes that Shapiro had to testify about was because he wasn't filing between 1978 and 1985, and he was involved in shady tax shelters. During that time, 1978 and 1985, was when Les Wexner started and was doing all those acquisitions. And Arthur Shapiro was handling Les Wexner's finance and filing his taxes. Is it just me? And mind you, I got to check. I'm pretty sure that this report was in 1991. So this is 4 years now. 4 years since Jeffrey Epstein replaced Arthur Shapiro. Arthur Shapiro was killed in March of 1985. By 1986, 1987, Epstein was in and taken his spot. The same year that this report was done and destroyed by the chief of police, Les Wexner signed power of attorney and all financial control of the Limited to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, let me ask you guys, is this going to be in the Epstein files? This is public knowledge. Like, they can't hide this. So when all these Epstein files eventually come out, is this going to be released in whole? Is it going to be a part of it? Is it going to be redacted? Are they going to talk about how Jeffrey Epstein connected with Les Wexner to begin with? I mean, I have a pretty good idea. And ironically, it goes back to 1978. Because in 1978, while Les Wexner was getting ready to, start this whole expansion with all these acquisitions, Jeffrey Epstein was working at Bear Stearns. And when Jeffrey Epstein was working at Bear Stearns, he was handling the account of another famous billionaire, a man named Edgar Bronfman. Now, if you don't know who Edgar Bronfman is, I'll be happy to do a whole episode on him and his brother another day. But long story short, Edgar Bronfman and his brother Charles Bronfman were very, very close with Les Wexner. In fact, Les Wexner and Charles Bronfman created Study Group, which is now known as Mega Group, in, I believe, 1991 as well. Ironically enough, 1991 is also the same year that Robert Maxwell died, or was murdered. That was never really fully clear. They said they had a heart attack, and then there was discrepancies in the autopsy. But long story short, Robert Maxwell dies in 1991. He gets buried on the Mount of Olives in Israel with Israeli leadership and intelligence at the funeral. And then, around that same time, his daughter Ghislaine Maxwell is in New York and moving in with Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein, who's now getting signed power of attorney and full control of Les Wexner's finances, while the Arthur Shapiro murder file, or whatever this thing is called, is floating around and just happens to get buried because it's libelous. You see how all this is starting to connect? And I only brought up Robert Maxwell because I know he died in 1991, and that year seems to be extremely relevant in this investigation, especially since he has direct ties to Jeffrey Epstein, Mossad, MI6, France. In fact, his wife and all 8 of his children were born in France. I wonder if Candace Owens knows that. But Robert Maxwell also facilitated the sales of the corrupted Promise software in the now famous Inslaw scandal in the 1980s, which I will definitely get into in the near future. And let's not forget the investigative journalist, Danny Casolaro, who was digging into that scandal along with Iran-Contra and other conspiracy theories of his time, who was also found dead in a hotel room around that period in 1991 with, I believe, 13 slashes to his wrist. They ruled that one a suicide, despite the fact he was getting death threats for months, and there is a very long trail of bodies that you will find when you start digging in that direction. And Netflix did a documentary about him called The Octopus Murders, but I wouldn't waste your time. It's a complete crock of shit. I actually consider it a giant lie by omission, considering the fact they never even mentioned Robert Maxwell, despite the fact they had a whole episode about Promise Software, which he was famously involved in. And we'll get into his publishing business another time and how it's affected the education system here in America. But I do want to bring up the fact that after he died, it was discovered that over $500 million was missing from his businesses that they never found. And if I'm not mistaken, that money that was missing was supposed to go to the pensions of 30,000 of his employees. And they found out it was missing a week after he died. And they never found it. A week after he died. You know, right in between the time that Israel buried him on the most holy land on the planet and Ghislaine Maxwell moved in with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, you start connecting all these dots and, you put a tinfoil hat on, it makes you wonder, who was doing Robert Maxwell's taxes all those years? And no, I'm not implying it was Arthur Shapiro. I have no reason to believe that. But where'd that money go? Where did that money go? And if Jeffrey Epstein was basically Robert Maxwell's understudy, and Jeffrey Epstein was this giant financier working with Edgar Bronfman and then replacing Arthur Shapiro, who's executed after being involved in shady tax deals and not filing taxes with the IRS and all that stuff that we went over. Now Jeffrey Epstein, Robert Maxwell's understudy, is taking that place, and he's not only replacing Arthur Shapiro handling Les Wexner's finances, but Les Wexner, potentially under a murder investigation, is signing over everything to Jeffrey Epstein. The same year that they find out that Robert Maxwell's money is missing. And don't get the wrong idea, because I am not trying to make any allegations or imply anything aside from what's already obvious from legal documents and official investigations. I'm only asking questions, and I think that they're all valid and should be asked, especially considering everything that we now know. And not even just about Jeffrey Epstein, but this entire history of cover-ups that have gone on within our system with him and with the people that he's been affiliated with, and which apparently also included the mob, foreign intelligence agencies, and our own law enforcement. A man was murdered, execution style. There was way more than enough in that file to warrant an investigation. The feds probably should have, the feds should have gotten involved. And there probably should have been internal affairs investigations. It said in the file that law enforcement in Detroit and Chicago were both looking the other way. And then a chief of police in Ohio destroys the file. And the man at the center of the investigation that didn't happen is signing everything over to Jeffrey Epstein, or full control, power of attorney to Jeffrey Epstein. It's like you can't make this. And this just goes back to what I was saying earlier about our politics being WWE. The people that I've been talking about, they are the elite class. These are the people that run the world. They are the donors. They are the ones that finance and pull the strings of our politicians. Why do you think nothing ever gets done about it? You think the FBI and the CIA just haven't figured it out yet? Like it's some ongoing investigation that Kash Patel is going to get to the bottom of, and Pam Bondi's just waiting for the green light so she could prosecute? Give me a break. I mean, once you start to see how all this branches out and who's friends with who and who's related to who, and this one's partnered with that one and that one went to this one's wedding, and this one stepped out of pocket, now they're not with us anymore, and that other one was a liability, but don't worry, he hung himself after he shot himself. I mean, it doesn't take long. You start to realize that the CIA, the FBI, the police, they don't really work for us. Their job is not to protect us. It is to protect them and preserve the system at all costs. That's what their job is. That's what it's all about. They'll do something evil just to scare the shit out of us, just to keep us in line and keep things going. And if you're one of those people out there, whether you're a liberal or a conservative or whatever, and you think all this is about Trump and he's like the end all be all, the make or break, then you need to really learn about this world and start reading, read history, get a better understanding of things, and then go outside and try to find people that you don't agree with, that you don't have things in common with, whose philosophies and the way that they think of life and how life should be is complete opposite of you. And just be nice. And you'll be surprised how nice they'll be to you. And how easy it is to find common ground with people when you just respect them. And that's the problem. People don't respect each other anymore. You got a whole country, hundreds of million people that don't know shit about shit, and they hate each other over nothing, over people that could care less about them. And that is America. All right, now that rant's over, let's get back to Les Wexner. Real quick, I just wanted to look into that New Albany thing that got brought up before. I just wanted to... who was involved in the project, what their roles were. Let's see if ChatGPT wants to tell the truth. Do 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 boo do boom bum 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 ba bum 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 bum. All right, Les Wexner, co-founder, original owner, financier of the New Albany Company. John Jack W. Kessler, co-founder and chairman of the New Albany Company. William is Brent Bradbury, Tom Ruby, Dick Rogenkamp, whatever, Alex Fisher. I'm seeing a whole lot of names. I don't see Jeffrey Epstein. Hold on. What about Jeffrey Epstein and DiBartolo? I don't remember the full name. Let's see. So I'm pretty sure, right? Didn't it say something in the report about DiBartolo? Didn't say anything about Epstein, but I'm pretty sure I read somewhere in one of my files that Epstein was involved in this one. I don't think Epstein was involved. As for DiBartolo, there may have been a Yeah, scrub it and look, we see all the sources that they're going through. Epstein likely held officer. However, DiBartolo's specific role isn't clear. Epstein's involvement with New Albany is contested. I haven't found or confirmed a role he was historically tied. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa! You guys read that? Oh, the short version. Here we go. They were trying to cover it up, but I knew I would find it. Jeffrey Epstein did have a paper roll tied to New Albany through Wexner. DiBartolo shows up as a Wexner business associate in older files, but not as a named New Albany co-developer. Jeffrey Epstein in New Albany. Ohio filings from the late 1990s show both Les Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein listed as presidents of the New Albany Company. See? Come on. Come on. I know what I'm talking about. Separate reporting show Wexner gave Epstein broad power of attorney in 1991. Oh, you don't say. It must have been like so hard. Like somewhere back there, like Larry Ellison just feels like a failure that ChatGPT is still giving this kind of information. So Epstein could sign for Wexner on corporate and real estate documents across his personal holdings. So on paper, Epstein held corporate titles and signing authority that touched New Albany Company. Physical presence in New Albany. Epstein bought a 10,000 square foot house directly adjacent to Wexner's estate in New Albany for $3.5 million. So he wasn't just a distant advisor, he had a residency inside the project. Ran New Albany claims versus denials. All right, let's see what the cop out is. In DOJ interview transcripts, Ghislaine Maxwell told investigators that Epstein ran New Albany, referring to the Community Country Club Golf Club under Wexner. A longtime New Albany Company executive, 30 plus years, told reporters he had never met Epstein and denied that Epstein was involved in running the company's operations. So, documented reality, Epstein had formal corporate positions and power of attorney that intersected New Albany Company plus a house on site. Disputed how much day-to-day control he actually exercised. Maxwell says he ran it. Internal execs said they never dealt with him. I don't know. Who are you going to believe? The internal execs or the guy with power of attorney and the $3.5 million house in the vicinity? I mean, come on. These people think we're stupid. It's like crazy. Here, we're talking about that was his name, Edward. Edward J. DiBartolo Sr., a Youngstown mall magnate, father of, is that Denise? Denise DiBartolo York? All right. The Wexner DiBartolo connection. In the Arthur Shapiro homicide organized crime analytical memo, Columbus Police Organized Crime Bureau 1991 investigators list the Limited, Edward DiBartolo Corporation, Youngstown, Walsh Trucking, Omni Oil, and John W. Kessler, New Albany co-founder, as interlinked business entities. That memo explicitly says, oh, we don't need to read that again, we know. But Wexner, DiBartolo, long history, public partnership in business dealings. His role in New Albany itself, what I did not see on record. No New Albany Company documents, and so far the current open source evidence goes Epstein clearly inside the corporate structure. President titles, power of attorney, physically in the community. Like, you know, it's like that Jay-Z song from the Black Album. What more can I say? You know, I'm going to get very comfortable on this camera. If Mossad doesn't get to me first. Well, let's see. No, not this one. Not this one. Victoria's Secret. Bought it for $1 million, worth $3.38 billion. And let's not forget that Epstein was pretending to be a scout. He was using Victoria's Secret, him and Ghislaine Maxwell, both using Victoria's Secret as part of their operation to recruit women. I mean, it's so disgusting. And let's see, after all this that we're finding out, let's see what Les Wexner had to say. His words. I mean, as far as Google says, who knows? If you could dispute this, please do. All right. So these are a couple of quotes of Les Wexner, the poor victim billionaire that was taken advantage of by Jeffrey Epstein. Had no idea any of this stuff was going on, and we didn't even get into any of the allegations from the women and what they say. I mean, I'm pretty sure there was some somewhat strong allegations against Wexner himself, but let's see. For now, let's go with this. All right. On awareness of illegal activity. Mind you, this is the guy who says he credits his parents for his success. His father taught him to pay attention to detail. His mother taught him to take chances and calculated risks. That's a quote, I believe, from his biography. Or so said ChatGPT. We know they're not always reliable. But anyway. Also the same guy who had all these other entanglements and affiliations. But all right, now I'm gonna read it. On awareness of illegal activity. Let me assure you that I was never is in capital letters. I was never aware of the illegal activity charged in this indictment. On being deceived. I am embarrassed that, like so many others, I was deceived by Mr. Epstein. On regret and trust. I know now that my trust in him was grossly misplaced, and I deeply regret having ever crossed his path. On Epstein's behavior. That was inexplicable, aberrant behavior, and clearly something we would all condemn. On misappropriated funds. He stated in a letter that Epstein had misappropriated vast sums of money from him and his family. All right, was that before or after you gave him access to the Lolita Express or the mansion in New York or the house in Ohio? I mean, you gave him power of attorney. What'd you think he was going to do? Never spend the money? It's crazy. It's crazy. So what do you guys think? What do you guys think? You think that Les Wexner is just this genius of retail and business, but when it comes to the people he's doing the business with, he's just always the victim. He's always the poor judge of character. He just never knows better. You know, whether it was, Alfred Tubman, the guy who was connecting him with the malls, or the fact that he had the mob doing his trucking company and was letting them use his address for the mail, the murder that he had nothing to do with. In fact, they were so innocent that they never even really investigated. They threw the whole file out. Nothing to see here. This is libelous. These are wild accusations. I mean, isn't that kind of like what they're saying now about Jeffrey Epstein when he was accused of being intelligence, whether CIA or Mossad or some kind of combination of both? And make no mistake, personally, that's what I think. But I'm not going to get into too much. I mean, clearly he was working with Mossad, but he definitely had some business going on with the CIA too, and MI6, but that's a whole other story. But I do not think for 1 second this guy was ever the victim. Ever the victim. In fact, he seems to be the common denominator between everything else. And you would have thought, okay, he goes public with the company. He's getting ready to make these acquisitions. Don't you think he would have had some kind of vetting process for the law firm and the lawyer? Like, he didn't just take that firm. He took Arthur Shapiro specifically. And that whole time, Shapiro wasn't filing his taxes, and then he's murdered. You would think that like, wouldn't that be some kind of wake up call for Les Wexner? It's like, all right, we messed up with this one, but the next guy that I'm gonna handle, the next guy I'm gonna hire to handle my money, I'm gonna get the right guy. I'm gonna get a guy that I trust so much that I'm gonna give him control over everything. I mean, that's basically what happened. And then when everything blew up in his face, it's same thing with the Arthur Shapiro murder. I have no idea. Like, what are you talking about? It wasn't me. He took advantage of me. Right? I mean, that's the picture that I'm kind of getting at all this. I don't believe it for a second. I don't think you should either. I mean, I think you'd have to really be a simple kind of simple to freaking believe this. Oh, man, I shouldn't be talking this much shit. I'm pretty sure this guy just bought a nice big house not that far from me. Right? Didn't he do that? Let me see. $38 million mansion from the Obamas. Les Wexner. Obama. 38 million. Let's see. Am I right about this? Billionaire businessman Les Wexner recently purchased the Blue Heron Farm Estate on Martha's Vineyard, a property where the Obama family previously vacationed, for $37 million. The user likely referenced 38 million as an approximation of the sale price. All right, I was off by a million. I was also off by the location. I mean, I shouldn't be saying where I live anyway, but it's not in Massachusetts, suckers. Oh, the property was originally listed for 39, and it sold for 37. It's crazy. The world we live in. The world we live in. Let's see what ChatGPT says. Run a deep search and analysis for allegations women made against Les Wexner involving Jeffrey Epstein. Come on, Larry, don't let me down. I know you got something in there. Yo, I'm telling you, you should have seen what I was doing with AI 6 months ago. I was like freaking Batman. I was in here every hour, every waking hour of every day, 18 hours a day, just getting all this information. And then I was creating models. And when I would go to sleep, I would have the models, I'd have the computer running 24/7, 24/7, and just putting all this stuff together for me. And like for months, that's what I did. I just analyzing patterns and connections and reading, and it's a lot. And it was completely gut wrenching. Completely gut wrenching. And what's crazy is at one part, because when you're doing everything and you're basing it on math, when you get to 100% on a probability, like that is a game changer. The difference between 99 and 100 is bigger than 50 and 99. Like it just is. And I had it set where, whenever there would be, something would come to 100% probability, it reruns everything and looks for things that I didn't see. And one day, about a month into my research, I'm running everything and I'm looking at, all the data. And I swear to God, it was the craziest thing. One of the 100% probabilities told me that I had been flagged by intelligence and that my life was in danger. And when I asked, like, what the hell is this about? It's, being a wise ass. Oh, you said if something's 100% to let you know. And I'm like, okay, well, let me know. I'm in danger. Like, tell me more. I want to know who's out to get me. And they're giving me like a whole breakdown. Well, it's a 43% chance that it's a Mossad rogue agent, but it could be someone still, or it could be this, it could be CIA, it could. And I'm just like, what the hell is this? And I freaked out. I made a video like, I love my family, blah, blah, blah. I sent it to my lawyer. He hasn't returned my call since. So I found another lawyer. Like, yo, it was crazy. It was crazy. After that, I had to unplug for a little bit. That's when I didn't even really want to do this. I was like, you know what? Maybe I could just like, find people like Candace Owens and Ian Carroll and like sprinkle it around a little bit. And eventually, I'm just like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it myself. Why the hell not? Why the hell not? You only live once, and I believe in Jesus, and I feel like I got to do the right thing. And if something happens to me, then whatever. At least I know I'm going out one of the good guys. All right, here's what's actually on the record about allegations women have made against Les Wexner in connection to Jeffrey Epstein. I'll break it into direct personal abuse allegations, enabler responsible allegations about his property and wealth, shareholder civil cases tying him and Epstein together, what Wexner says in response. All right. Direct sexual abuse allegations against Wexner himself, Virginia Giuffre, an Epstein survivor. Well, I mean, not really. She turned up dead last year, but anyway. Newly unsealed court documents from Virginia Giuffre 2015 defamation case against Ghislaine Maxwell, unsealed in early 2024, Oh, I didn't even know that. So it got unsealed in early 2024, and she was found dead in, I believe, April, which is kind of early 2024. All right. So Gouffre explicitly named Les Wexner as one of the men she says was trafficked to while underage. Okay. In a 2016 deposition, Gouffre testified that she was trafficked to Les Wexner multiple times by Epstein and Maxwell. When asked whether Wexner was one of the powerful business executives she was trafficked to, she said yes. She said she had engaged in activity with Wexner multiple times, estimated between 3 and 10 times. I mean, that's kind of a big estimation, but and that he participated in sexual activity with minors. She also described being told by Maxwell to wear lingerie for Wexner. Wexner's response: a spokesperson for Wexner has denied these allegations, saying that Wexner knew nothing about Epstein's sex trafficking and rejected Gouffre's claims. Legal status: these statements appear in sworn deposition testimony, but no criminal charges have been filed against Wexner based on Gouffre's allegation. Shocker. The broader Gouffre-Maxwell case settled. There's no court finding that Wexner abused Gouffre. Yeah, that's because we are the United States of Kangaroo Courts of America. So Gouffre has made clear sworn allegations of underage sex and trafficking involved Wexner, which he formally denies and which has not resulted in charges. And this is ChatGPT. Damn. Allegations that Wexner was responsible enabling abuse via his property and security. Maria Farmer, artist, first known complainant to FBI about Epstein. Maria Farmer is the key woman here. She doesn't say Wexner personally assaulted her, but she explicitly holds him responsible because of what happened on his property with his security. In 1996, Epstein arranged for her to work as an artist in residence at a 10,000 square foot guest house on Les Wexner's estate in New Albany, Ohio. New Albany, Ohio? Is that the same New Albany, Ohio that Epstein was not president of the project? He just had the $3.5 million house and power of attorney? All right. Farmer says that once there, she discovered the home was guarded by Wexner's armed security and that she had to call Abigail Wexner, Les's wife, for permission to leave the property. In a sworn affidavit filed in support of Virginia Gouffre's suit against Alan Dershowitz, oh, I didn't even get into him. That's another guy. And in interviews, Farmer alleges that Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell sexually assaulted her inside that Wexner guest house and that she fled into another room and barricaded the door. Security guards on the property told her she could not leave and held her against her will for 12 hours until her father drove in from Kentucky to get her. Yo, this is crazy. She then reported the assault to the NYPD and the FBI in 1996, but says no action was taken. Farmer has been extremely explicit in the press. She told the Washington Post and repeated to the Times of Israel that she holds Wexner responsible for what happened because the assault occurred on a property owned or controlled by him and monitored by Wexner's wife and the Wexner security team, including sheriffs, deputies working for him. Some reporting notes that specific house was legally titled to Epstein at one point, but functioned as effectively the guest house for the Wexner estate, guarded by Wexner's security detail. Bottom line for Farmer, alleged perpetrators Epstein and Maxwell, not Wexner directly. Wexner is accused of being responsible, enabling because the assault happened on his controlled estate. His security allegedly detained her and blocked her escape. Other women survivors referencing Wexner as an enabler. Annie Farmer, Maria's little sister. Annie was abused by Epstein at the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, not at Wexner's home, and her 2019 lawsuit targets Epstein's estate. In more recent advocacy, Annie was publicly singled out Oh, no. And he publicly singled out people who supplied enormous wealth to Epstein and enabled his lifestyle, with Wexner often mentioned in the context, framing him as an enabler whose money and trust helped operate. Oh, no, helped Epstein operate. I'm sorry, I've been doing this a while. It's kind of late. So Annie's allegation is more systematic, financial enabling, rather than a direct assault allegation against Wexner. Shareholder and civil complaints. He knew or should have known. Separate from the trafficking victims themselves, shareholder lawsuits have put in writing that a lot of women and advocates were alleging more generally that Wexner helped create a culture that protected predators and failed to act regarding Epstein. Key points: a Delaware Chancery Court derivative complaint filed January 14, 2021 by L Brand's shareholders claimed Wexner and other top executives created an entrenched culture of misogyny, bullying, and harassment at Victoria's Secret. Wexner was aware of abuses being committed by Jeffrey Epstein and that this breached his fiduciary duties and damaged the brand. Another complaint highlighted by Oregon's Public Pension Fund alleged the board failed to investigate Wexner close personal ties to Epstein and allowed a pattern of sexual misconduct and retaliation. Local Columbus coverage notes a civil complaint naming Les and Abigail Wexner in connection with Epstein as part of litigation over L Brand's cultures and governance. The outcome: in 2021, L Brand's then Victoria's Secret parent agreed to a $90 million settlement to resolve these shareholder derivative suits and implement governance reforms around harassment reporting and board oversight. The company did not admit any wrongdoing but agreed to structural changes. These cases don't say Wexner personally assaulted women, but they do formally allege that he knew or should have known widespread sexual misconduct and misogyny at his flagship brand, Epstein's use of the network and reputation, the overall picture, and where the evidence stands. Putting it all together. Direct abuse allegation under oath. Virginia Gouffre testified that she was trafficked to Wexner for multiple times while underage and that he participated in sex with minors. These statements are in court deposition transcripts unsealed in 2024. Wexner, via spokesperson, flatly denies this. He knew nothing of Epstein's trafficking. Property security enabling under oath. Maria Farmer alleges. Yeah, this is just going to have me say what I already just read. Oh, no criminal charges against Wexner so far. I mean, the guy's what, 87 years old? 87 years old? He hired Epstein, 86, 87. I mean, that's almost 40 years ago. Arthur Shapiro was executed half of this guy's life ago, even if he got arrested today, which he absolutely more than likely should be in jail. This guy is definitely, like, whatever this list is, I mean, I don't think I'm going to get sued for saying this guy's probably on it. But where's the justice? This is crazy. Well, let's go back to what he said. No, that's not it. Ba-ba-ba. Oh, would I lose it? No, whatever. Now, let's have some fun. Based on all of this information, what is the probability that Les Wexner investigated for at least one crime involving Jeffrey Epstein? Oh, short answer, very high. On a Bayesian read of the public record. Spoiler alert, why do you think my name is Bayes? Why do you think I go by Bayes? let me explain something to you. I truly believe that math is the language of God. You could break everything down to numbers, including the Epstein list, which I have done. I mean, I'm limited by my resources, but if I had a supercomputer and an uncensored AI source using my models, I am pretty sure that I'd be able to undo all those redactions on whatever's coming out from the government. I really, really think so. But for now, I regress. I'd put it in order of 80 to 95% that Les Wexner meets any reasonable threshold for should be formally investigated for at least one potential crime involving Jeffrey Epstein. That's not the same as he's guilty. Yeah, of course not. Major pro investigation evidence notes Virginia Gouffre's direct sworn allegation of abuse in unsealed deposition testimony. We just read this. Should have been investigated there. Legally, that raises at least 3 potential areas investigators should look at with Maria Farmer: unlawful restraint, false imprisonment, knowledge, willful blindness, civil liability. Epstein's extraordinary control over Wexner's money and companies. Corporate culture, enabling patterns. Counter evidence, factors that push the probability down. Yeah, down from what, 100 to 90? No charges have been brought against Wexner to date, despite heavy media scrutiny, multiple investigations. The hell did they investigate? Law enforcement sees the same material and judges them too weak to charge. And if it's not too weak to charge, they just destroy it. Right, James Jackson? Right? That was his name? It's such a joke. Now it's getting into how it gets. If you give full weight to Gouffre Farmer financial entanglement, it looks more like 90 to 95%. Let's have a little more fun. Run a deep search and analysis into the murder of Arthur Shapiro, the murder file, and how it was handled by James Jackson and the Ohio police. But yeah, Ian, if you see this, which I hope you do, Bayes' theorem. Break it all down to math. Break it down to probability models. Different math formulas. Get all the information that you can. It all pieces together. You'll be shocked what you find. You'll be shocked what you find. And I'm just playing around. I'm doing this on ChatGPT. And if there's anybody else who knows just how censored ChatGPT has become and how hard they go out of their way to protect especially certain foreign nation, it's Ian Carroll. All right. Now it's just, this is all stuff. I'm not going to read all this again. It says within weeks he told him to destroy the file. Yo, he only got a 5-day suspension for the destroying the records. Talking about James Jackson, that Ohio police chief. The wild speculation. Unreal. Unreal. All right, my analysis. Well, not my analysis. ChatGPT's analysis in the post Larry Ellison era. No, Larry Ellison doesn't own ChatGPT. Obviously, he just Oracle, I believe, has some kind of deal with them over the cloud and the data. So he just gets to like he just gets this sent into his supercomputer pretty much. I wonder how many lists I'm on. All right, my analysis. What this tells about Jackson File, police, the murder itself. Conservative still reads Shapiro was killed in a mob style hit, almost certainly tied to his IRS trouble. Whatever he was going to say to the grand jury. Barry Kessler reminds the likely single suspect, but the case was allowed to go cold. Ba-ba-ba-ba. What is the probability that Arthur Shapiro was working on this acquisitions between and the time of his death? Well, he himself wasn't paying his taxes. I put it around. All right, ChatGPT says between 85 and 95% that Arthur Shapiro was actively working on Wexner Limited matters, including at least some acquisition related work between 1978 and his death in 1985, while he himself had not been filing his own tax returns. Shapiro definitely handled Wexner's limited legal work. Shapiro was a partner, we know that. Oh, we could treat it as essentially certain, 100% that between 1978 and his death in 1985, Shapiro was not filing his own returns. Oh, never mind. Wexner major acquisition wave landed right in that window. Putting to numbers. He managed the account. Main lawyer had some role in clients' marquee acquisitions between 1982 and 85, between 80 and 90%. There's an 85 to 95% that Shapiro was actively working on the Wexner Limited matters, including at least some acquisition related work during the same years when he wasn't. Okay. What is the probability if Arthur Shapiro was questioned by the grand I don't know if I worded that great, but we'll see. I'd put it very high, roughly 85 to 95%, that if Arthur Shapiro had actually testified to the grand jury, he had at least some information that could have created real trouble or serious risk for Les Wexner. See what I'm doing right now? Every time I add another piece to the puzzle, it's another factor in the equation, and the numbers change. Might increase motive. It's very likely 80 to 95% that Shapiro did tax structuring work that touched Walsh Trucking, Frank Walsh, and or DeBartolo linked interests on top of Wexner the Limited. Shapiro wasn't just dangerous to Kessler, his partner in tax crime, he was potentially dangerous to a whole cluster. Big client, Limited Wexner, major vendor, Costa Nostra flags, Walsh Trucking, and long-term partner group orbit. Long-term partner group, DeBartolo orbit. So his grand jury testimony risked opposing multiple financially and politically powerful actors, not just one dodgy law partner. That pushes the probability away from Kessler purely acting alone and toward broader network motive. So before this last step, it was 20 to 30 that Kessler was lone mastermind. Kessler plus bigger interests, 25 to 35, so that was the most promising. Higher level OC linked actors without Kessler was 25-30, and other unknown, 10 to 15. After adding Shapiro almost certainly did work that touched Walsh and DeBartolo, the Kessler lone mastermind drops from 15 to 25. Kessler in a broader network goes to 30 to 40. And higher level linked actors without Kessler in the loop goes to 25 to 30, now outranking Kessler. Kessler definitely stays in the frame. His own tax crime, later murder conviction, still make him very plausible piece to the puzzle. The short version is Epstein case shows a national multi-stage pattern of soft cover-up and damage control, while the Shapiro case shows a local, cruder version of the same instinct. Narrow the investigation, bury the paper that points towards powerful people, and later call it procedural or negligence. Epstein concrete cover-up containment moves. The 2007-2008 Sweetheart Non-Prosecution Agreement, U.S. Attorney's Office Alex Acosta in the Southern District of Florida cut an extraordinary non-prosecution agreement with Epstein. It shut down a federal sex trafficking investigation. It gave immunity to any potential co-conspirators. It was negotiated in secret. Epstein's victims weren't told. The DOJ's Office of Professional Responsibility later concluded that Acosta used poor judgment but did not find prosecutable misconduct. The NPA still stands as one of the most lopsided deals ever given to a serial child sex offender. A federal judge later found that by hiding the NPA from victims, the government violated the Crimes Victims' Rights Act, but the ruling did not undo the deal. I love how 2019 jail, suicide, they put the suicide in quotations, and car crash evidence handling. Officially ruled a suicide, but the reports themselves read like a checklist of institutional failure. All right, we don't need to do that. We know Epstein didn't kill himself. Heavily redacted. Arthur Shapiro, the classic local version. Side by side. Network, not the truth. Now, I just ask it to run patterns, run comparisons, and then simple. How does this affect the probabilities? Run the numbers and update. And now, you see, with this, you can totally lean it if you wanted to in one direction or the other because you control the information that you're inputting. You know, like if you're going to try to do this, don't brainwash yourself. You want to look for the truth. New evidence folding. All right, the updated posteriors. After the update, you get approximately Kessler being the lone mastermind is now the least likely probability. Kessler and a broader network goes up to basically a coin toss. The network without Kessler as the main driver, not that far behind at 36%, and then 10% unknown. All right, I'm not going to keep going in this. Like I said, if I wanted, I could just find every little thing and plug it in. And I'm just trying to give you guys an example so that you can get an idea how I do this research, and then you can find out for yourself. Give me a 2-paragraph summary of your conclusion. Actually, you know what I probably should do? I'm not even gonna. The updated analysis shows that Arthur Shapiro's murder is far more consistent with a broader network-driven silencing than with a simple personal motive by his law partner, Barry Kessler. Once you factor in that Shapiro handled complex financial and tax matters for the limited, likely did structuring work touching Walsh Trucking and possibly DiBartolo-linked interests, was about to testify before a federal grand jury, and sat in the middle of a web of entities later flagged for organized crime exposure, the probability his death served multiple power interests rises sharply. Add the fact that after his murder, Jeffrey Epstein effectively stepped into the strategic Shapiro slot in Wexner's world, gaining control over Wexner's finances, companies, and real estate structures, and the pattern looks less like isolated partner drama and more like a continuity of control, where a compromised or risky insider is removed and replaced with one who is both loyal and deeply connected. When you overlay this with how the system behaved after the murder, specifically police chief James Jackson illegal destruction of Shapiro's murder file, which mapped the limited Walsh DiBartolo OC links, the probabilities shift even further. The Shapiro file destruction mirrors the same exact institutional reflex seen in the Epstein case: suppress the sensitive analysis, shrink the investigative perimeter, and protect the network rather than expose it. This is what I've been saying the whole time. I went on that rant before, that their job is self-preservation and protecting the system, regardless of how evil it is. It's not about protecting the innocent or actually solving these crimes. Once this cover-up pattern is treated as evidence, the model lands at roughly 81% probability that Shapiro's death aligned with the broader business OC network interests, 54% that Kessler was involved in some way, and only 9% that Kessler acted entirely alone. In essence, the more we examine how Shapiro's work, death, and file were handled, the clearer it becomes that this was not a personal dispute. It was almost certainly a strategic removal of a liability inside a larger system. And like I said, in the past, I would go through this, go rabbit hole after rabbit hole, plugging everything in. And then a lot of times, what would end up happening, and why I don't want to waste my time now, especially with ChatGPT, but you could do this with any AI, is that I would find that once things would get closer to that 90 and even possibly 99 plus percent, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the probability would drop down low again. And I'd be like, what's going on? And then I would reverse engineer it. And I'd say, give me, tell me how you got to that conclusion. And factors that would make a big difference would go missing, especially in terms of, for instance, Virginia Gouffre. ChatGPT, every time I would plug everything in and get probabilities on what really happened and how I was saying I think that I could, undo some of these redactions when the time comes. Every time I would get to these points where I'd get these very, very high probabilities, all of a sudden it just forgets that Virginia Giuffre is dead, and it says no, she's alive. It's telling me that she's alive, and now all of a sudden these probabilities that were high are getting lower because her death actually makes a very big difference in this investigation. It really does. It makes a very big difference. And she's not the only one. I'm not going to, this being the first episode, we're already probably over 2 hours, but, or close to it. But there's a lot of bodies. There's a lot of bodies. And there's a lot of money. And there's a lot of money and a lot of transfers of wealth that went to very, very powerful, dangerous people. And this is the world today. This is what we're dealing with. And this is why this Epstein case is so important. And of all these people that are screaming for it, they want the list, they want the list. They think that it's all about just sex trafficking, and they want to know who was diddling who, or who was engaging in illicit activity with children. But it's so much more than that. He was into so much more than most people could ever imagine. And he connects so many of these people. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. All right, guys, and that is going to wrap up the first episode of Bayes is Based. I know it was kind of a long one. I appreciate everyone that stuck it out and watched it. I said I wanted to come out swinging. I think I did. The goal is to change the world. I can't do it by myself. It's going to take a lot of people, actually. But I will tell you this, being a new channel, every single like, subscribe, comment, share, it goes a very long way. So if you enjoy the content, you want me to make more content, that is really the best thing that you could do for me right now. Also, if you want to find me on social media, I just made all new accounts. RealBayes, I'm on almost every platform. And remember what I said before about being kind and, being grateful. If you start every day just showing gratitude, maybe praying, and just being kind to people, I guarantee that you are going to have a lot more good days than bad. And yeah, I mean, today was a perfect example that, we see that there is a lot of evil in the world, but there's also a lot of good. And content like this, I don't make it for anybody to hate anybody or judge anybody or anything like that at all. It's all about just learning. The more you know about the world, it changes your perspective on things and just how you deal with life. And, it's true what they say, knowledge is power, and there's power in numbers. And at the end of the day, we really do need to stick together. And that all starts with being kind. Um, I don't know. I think that is about it. Oh, yeah, one more thing. Make sure you tell everybody you know that Bayes is based.